Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be following a trajectory that for many of you who have followed us for more than 18 years have certainly come to know well. And that is the idea of aging and how we can actually reverse the common ideas of what aging actually is. As many of us have followed, we've actually looked into many things such as, the proper kinds of exercise and stretching that a person can do well beyond their 50s and 60s to actually reverse conditions such as perhaps being paraplegic. And in fact, we actually featured a guest who at the age of 66 began some wonderful stretching exercises to the point that he got himself out of a wheelchair and walked across Canada as well as the United States. Quite an amazing feat when you think about the idea that, as we get older, at least so the paradigm shares with us, gives us the idea that there's very little we can do about it. We've also come to learn the idea about organics and actually being able to take care of our food by the kind of food that we put into our body. But while stretching and great exercises may not do everything, and certainly organic foods and breathing great oxygen and drinking fresh, clean, filtered water may not be enough, sometimes we need to look at something that we can take a little bit further, such as supplementation. On our program today, we're going to be bringing a physician who's going to be talking about her love of movement and what science has labeled as age-associated cellular decline, which begins in our 40s and accelerates into our 60s. We're going to learn the importance of cellular nutrition as we age, and we're going to be finding out some wonderful things out there that are available at which we can actually protect our cells as well as gain energy levels and muscle and organ function, which can actually reverse some of the things that we felt we were just at bay to live with. Our guest today is a board-certified family medicine physician who completed her residency at Harvard UCLA Medical Center and medical school training at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine as one of the top 10 medical schools in the nation by the U.S. News & World Report. She's also had many television appearances, and she's going to be joining us today to talk about what can be available to reverse this particular paradigm. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Dr. Noelle Reed. Dr. Reed, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Now, should we refer to you as Dr. Reed or just Noelle?
You know what? Whatever makes you feel comfortable. I don't get caught up in titles.
There you go. Well, here's the idea. I thought Noelle would be beautiful because then you think of Christmas and the wonderful gift that I think you're going to be sharing with our audience here today. So here's the thing. Now, you also are involved in yoga, so, that involves, for many people know, that's a lot of movement, things like that. So tell us how this all evolved for you to the point where you're at today.
Well, I was a dancer before I was a doctor, so movement was always a part of my life. Dance was my first love, and I actually told my mom at the age of 5 I wanted to be a dancing doctor. I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that I had two, really important interests, in that being dance and certainly science was an interest of mine. And so there was the artist part of who I was, and there was the scientist, and I just wanted to figure out how to merge the two. And then as a dancer, just really learning how important, movement was just in life and, in terms of maintaining optimal health, figuring out how could I make movement part of my practice, as a transitioning into becoming a physician and healer, how could I make that a part of how I treat and heal my patients, because it was just necessary. And so as a dancer, doing yoga and Pilates therapy to kind of, keep my body intact and to, heal injuries that would occur, I decided to continue that as a physician and utilize as a tool for my patients.
Now, you bring something up that I think our listeners should really be aware of, and that is the way that we approach, I guess, health and healing. Mm-hmm. We tend to, especially in America, and it's really neat the way you put all that, because you said you approached medicine from being someone who was committed to movement, such as dancing, yoga, things like that. So when you think about the reality of what you're saying here, you think, okay, so a lot of times people go to the doctor, much like when they take their car to a mechanic. I usually love using that analogy because generally people don't take their car to a mechanic until something goes wrong. And yet anybody who's ever bought a brand new car, inside of it has what's called the user handbook. And in that user handbook, they actually have a schedule of suggested maintenance that needs to be done. Now, where I became aware of that was when I took this wonderful helicopter tour, not actually in a helicopter, but actually at a helicopter airport, okay? And so this guy took us on this wonderful tour, and he was showing these different stages of, explaining that a helicopter, after so many hours, this gets taken a look at, and if it needs maintenance, then that gets taken care of. The same thing with a car, right? And so you come to realize, well, that's necessary, because if you're not paying attention to this routine necessary maintenance on a helicopter, well, you don't want to be a couple of thousand feet in the air and realize, oops, I didn't clean the carburetor. And like a car, most people know how to stop and put gas in it. They know that when the tire goes flat, it's time to change it. But most of the time, they never follow the protocols of scheduled maintenance, which really in the long run is a lot less expensive than when you let things go, because what happens then, as I like to explain, is, well, if you don't do this in a car, well, systemically, once that breaks, something else is already beginning to break down because of that, because you put too much strain on the other part of the system. And yet humans also go to a doctor, especially I think in the United States, only when they feel that ache and pain. But they don't realize what systemically weren't you paying attention to that you could have routinely taken care of, rather than just waiting and going to a doctor and say, well, my shoulder hurts, or I've got this cough. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Prevention is always easier than treatment. And one of the reasons that I chose really family medicine is that there is such a strong focus on preventative care. You don't want to wait until there's a disease state. We're kind of like working behind the 8 ball at that point. And so it's important to, educate and be aware that there are things that need to come into place, well before you end up having a symptom. Because typically once you present with headache, or once you present with chest pain, or whatever it is, there's already end organ damage. There's already been some disease that is set in that could be, towards its end stages, because those necessary steps for prevention weren't put into place. And we're just talking simple, basic behaviors like proper nutrition and movement every day, checking in with self, stress management, all these things that seem pretty simple, but I think that oftentimes we forget just how important they are.
And that's why I liked when you were explaining that you approached medicine. First of all, you were in dancing, which is movement. You said, well, why don't I become that doctor that focuses in that direction? So then a person who goes to a doctor simply thinks, well, what is my focus here? So the doctor says, rather than, what's wrong with you, you say, well, what are your goals? How do you want to be? And let's move you in that direction, rather than, well, okay, you got this ache and pain, here's a pill, go ahead and call me in the morning kind of a situation. So your approach is really more organic, and it's quite different than what we typically experience out there.
I think so, and I think that there is a shift that's been occurring over the last few decades, actually, in terms of how, in the medical world, in the medical community, how we approach medicine in general, and that there is more of a importance placed on taking a holistic approach, because we are learning that, hey, a 30-day prescription is just really putting a Band-Aid on the situation, or when you get to the point where you have to prescribe a medicine, it is in the later stages of things where there are many things that could have been done beforehand before we have gotten to this point, whether we are managing diabetes or high blood pressure or heart disease, or even the onset of a cancer. There are things that could have been done prior to that to prevent. And so, what I try to do is really just take that holistic approach, understanding that we are not one-dimensional beings. We are multidimensional. We exist in mind, body, spirit, and one impacts the other. And in order for us to be optimally healthy, we have to address all aspects of self. and understanding that, there are tools that we can use to mitigate or slow down disease progression, or even mitigate or slow down the aging process. There are really very basic things that we could be doing on a daily basis to slow down that progression, and movement, being key. And this is well studied. So, this isn't just, anecdotal. There is data to back up how important movement is. There was a study that was published in the American Journal of Epidemiology in 2018 that noted that for those who sit for prolonged periods of time, which was defined as more than 6 hours out of the day, out of the active hours of the day, had more than a 19% elevated risk of death due to all causes. So heart disease, stroke, cancer, and that even for those who worked out a few times a week, that didn't erase the negative impact that sitting for long periods of time had on health outcomes and longevity. There was another study that was done in UCLA in 2018 that noted that for those who tend to be more sedentary, have thinning in the areas of the brain that are responsible for memory, specifically the medial temporal lobe, and that here again, even high levels of exercise didn't undo the maleffects that prolonged sitting had on the brain. So we know that movement is necessary, and whether it be for brain health, heart health, or longevity, you got to get up and move, and making it a lifestyle, as opposed to a chore that maybe never gets done,
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter that your movement should also be enjoyable. So what do you think about people who actually kind of swing to where they're jogging every day? Is this such a good thing, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, again, movement every day is key. So you want, of course, to do things that bring you joy. So if jogging is it and you're doing that every day, great. Walking is actually an excellent form of exercise. We don't necessarily have to do anything so rigorous and intense to have positive impacts on the heart and brain. And in fact, there was another study that noted that what they termed as high-intensity incidental activity had positive impacts on heart and brain. And that means doing your chores, like doing your laundry, gardening, washing your car, going for a walk. Anything that gets your heart rate up and gets you breathing more efficiently has positive impacts on brain, heart health, and longevity. So, yes, if you want to jog every day, I think that that's great. If you, whatever activity you love, I think you should do it often. And again, just understanding that movement should be incorporated throughout the course of the day. So what I typically tell my patients is that if you are sitting for more than 30 minutes during the active hours of your day, you're sitting too long. So you want to get up, move around, get the blood flowing for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and make this a habit. And that one behavioral shift could have, significant impacts on your health outcomes and longevity.
Now, one of the big things, too, that's pretty important, and I know that we're going to kind of switch gears here to talk about this, and that's the idea of how the body, tends to heal itself, rebuild, and replace. I mean, after all, one of the things, especially for people who like to go in and exercise, whether they go to a gym and they're lifting weights or you're running, stretching, things like that, they'll feel those aches and pains. So let's talk about what's happening in the body there, and especially as we get older. Recovery, as they like to say in athletics, is something that seems to take a little bit longer. So what's really going on?
Well, are we talking about age-associated cellular decline? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well, it's sort of a balance of both. First of all, we talk about movement. Let's say that you're somebody who likes to go to the gym, or as we were mentioning, someone who likes to run or jog, or someone who does yoga or dance. Well, obviously, at the end of the day, you're going to be feeling sometimes aches and pains, things like that. And so we're talking about body recovery, that sort of a thing. So what's going on there? And then, of course, as we get older, it seems to take longer. I mean, we don't bounce back like those little rubber people we used to be, teenagers and kids, so.
So body recovery is definitely can be an individual journey. So it is, different for every person in terms of, what your history has been with movement, what type of exercise you're doing. And so, when you're feeling those aches and pains, it could be due to so many things. It could be due to dehydration. as many of us, don't drink enough water. And for most adults, that really should be about 2 to 3 liters a day. And I think that oftentimes we fall short of that. And especially if you're active, you want to make sure that you're getting in enough water. So when you're dehydrated, that may make the muscles feel more achy or feel more crampy, more tense. If there's been previous trauma or if there has been overuse injuries, those things can come into play. So if you were an athlete or a dancer and you've had previous tears or you've had previous surgeries, then, there could be some scar tissue there that, when you start to move around and get that activity in, that you're feeling that a little bit more. Now, when we start to get a little bit older and we advance in life, and typically after the fourth decade of life, so into our early 40s and beyond, there could be some other things that are going on, in terms of dealing with muscle stamina, muscle strength. And so there is something known as a natural process known as age-associated cellular decline. And that is where the cells, so the cells that make up the tissues, that make up the organs, are not functioning at their optimal level. And there are many processes that can be declining at that point. But one of the key, rather hallmarks of this change is in dealing with the mitochondria. Okay, so mitochondria, if you remember from biology class, these are the power plants of the cells, the powerhouse of the cell, right? So it is the organelle or component of the cell that is responsible for producing the energy that the cell needs to do its work. Mitochondria are responsible for producing more than 90% actually of the energy that the cell needs to do its work. And what we find is as we get older, so specifically after 40 years of age and as we get into our 60s and beyond, the mitochondria may not perform as well. And that then impacts the energy that the cell produces. That can then impact the way that cell functions and thus how that tissue and organ functions. And so this may manifest in physical ways such as decreased muscle mass, muscle strength, muscle stamina, or overall generalized fatigue.
So it's really important, too, it sounds to me, that as we get older that our cells just aren't as active at replacing, replicating, or rebuilding. Is that what you're saying then?
It could be. So specifically when we're talking about skeletal muscle, there is a natural process known as metaphagy, which is the recycling process of mitochondria. So where older mitochondria are removed from the cells and new ones are regenerated. When this is not functioning well and when the mitochondria are not functioning well within skeletal muscle, then that's where you may see these physical effects such as muscle weakness or decreased muscle stamina.
Now, so what do we do about it since this is something that declines, it sounds like, as we, get into our 40s, 50s, and 60s? I mean, obviously the paradigm is beginning to shift that we don't have to age the way we used to think we had to. Exactly.
So, again, behavior is foundational. So you always want to make sure that you have proper nutrition, regular, consistent exercise, stress management at baseline. But now science has found that there are cellular nutrients that can actually be added into your daily regimen to act as an additive, an adjunct to these basic lifestyle behaviors. We now know that, there is a point of intervention because we are well aware that the mitochondria decline. Well, this is where we can now intervene. And that's what cellular nutrients do. So these are specialized nutrients that work to improve mitochondrial function. And this has been well studied. So there are multiple cellular nutrients that have been found to improve cellular health, cellular function. 3 being nicotinamide riboside, uracil A, and glynac, which is a blend of amino acids, which are the precursors for glutathione, which we can talk about just in a moment. But these are 3 key nutrients that have been found to work at improving mitochondrial function and thus cellular function overall. So nicotinamide riboside is actually a B3 derivative. It is a special form of niacin, and it has been found to boost NAD. And so you may ask, well, what is that? So NAD stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It is an important molecule that is present in every cell of the body and is responsible for proper cellular metabolism. So it essentially works with the mitochondria to break down the foods that we eat, so the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins that we consume, and break it down into an energy source that the cell can use, specifically ATP. And what we know is that NAD declines as we get older. Okay, so between the ages of 40 and 60, NAD can decline by as much as 50%. And so we may feel that, and that may manifest itself as lack of energy. And so when we supplement with NR, nicotinamide riboside, this helps to boost NAD. So it boosts NAD production, which then aids in making more efficient energy production from the cell, and we may feel more energy overall. And this has been clinically proven. And actually in some of the clinical trials, there's been, I believe, 11 published studies at this point looking at the effects of NR, nicotinamide riboside supplementation. And across the board, what they have found is that when middle-aged adults, older adults, supplement with NR, this helps to boost NAD and can do so in as soon as 2 weeks after supplementation.
Wow, sounds like a lot's going on there. So people really, let's go ahead and break this down when it talks to, I guess it sounds to me like cellular nutrition is just as much a part as body nutrition is.
Oh, for sure. So, it's important that, we get in the macronutrients that we need, right? The foods that we eat. So the carbs, protein, fat, micronutrients, the vitamins that we take. But now we know that there are these cellular nutrients that penetrate even deeper. So at the cellular level to improve cellular performance, which can have an impact on how we age. So as I mentioned, so the nicotinamide riboside, which directly impacts cellular energy production, urolithin A, getting back to muscle performance, as we were talking about recovery, urolithin A is a cellular nutrient that impacts mitochondrial function within skeletal muscle cells. So it is actually a metabolite that we produce when we eat certain foods. So when we eat pomegranates, nuts, berries, essentially those foods that contain a compound known as L-tannins. When this compound comes in contact with our gut flora, our gut bacteria, that is when urolithin A is synthesized. However, not everyone synthesizes urolithin A as efficiently as others. So 1 in 3 individuals don't have the necessary gut flora that is needed to properly synthesize urolithin A. So that means that many of us may be lacking. And urolithin A, as I mentioned, it aids mitochondrial function within skeletal muscle cells. So what has been found in the clinical studies is that when you supplement with urolithin A, this helps to improve that process that I mentioned prior, metaphagy. So that recycling process that is supposed to occur of mitochondria within the skeletal muscle cells. They've looked at supplementation both in middle-aged adults and older adults, and what has been noted as well is that when urolithin A is supplemented, this helps to improve metaphagy, mitochondrial function within skeletal muscle cells, which then can have an impact, a positive impact on muscle strength, can improve muscle strength with consistent supplementation. I also mentioned Glynac. So Glynac is another cellular nutrient. Glynac is short for glycine and N-acetylcysteine. So those are amino acids that are the precursors or building blocks for glutathione. Glutathione is a powerful antioxidant, and it's actually naturally present in all of our cells, and we need it. We need it to protect our cells from oxidative stress. Okay, so as we get older, what we know is that glutathione levels decline, but also oxidative stress increases. So really that leaves our cells, it puts our cells in danger of damage, damage, cellular membrane damage, DNA damage, which then can impact the way that our cells function, which then can impact the way that our immune systems respond, because glutathione is necessary to not only protect cells but also our immune cells. So what has also been found clinically is that when you supplement with Glynac, so the glycine and N-acetylcysteine, this helps to boost glutathione synthesis, boost glutathione levels within the cells, thus aiding and improving our ability to fight off and combat oxidative stress, boosting our immune response.
So it sounds like there's quite a bunch of different kinds of nutrients that cells need. Are we actually getting that out of the food that we eat, or is there a way that we can kind of get in there and perhaps supplement what may be lacking, or maybe even concentrate where we can get better concentration without so much bulk, so to speak?
Right. That's an excellent question. And unfortunately, for these cellular nutrients, they're not readily available from the diet. So, for instance, nicotinamide riboside, it's present in trace amounts in cow's milk, but the amount that you would get from a typical serving is rather small. It would not, even if you consume large amounts of milk on a daily basis, it would not be sufficient to have any real impact on cell function. So supplementation would be necessary. And typically, so what has been studied in the clinical trials, usually the supplementation is anywhere from 250 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams a day. You would not get that from a day's intake of cow's milk. The urolithin A, as I mentioned, yes, typically one can synthesize that when you eat certain foods, but many of us don't have the gut flora that we need to allow for that synthesis to be sufficient. So here again, many individuals would need supplementation to see significant impact or effects. Glycine and N-acetylcysteine is just not, it's not available or readily available in any food. So that again is something that would have to be supplemented.
So how do we go about doing that? I mean, there is a lot out there. I mean, you got a lot of vitamin stores, nutrition stores. I mean, there seems to be a lot and a big array of confusion. So how do we, I guess, find our way through this chasm, this forest of what's available and what's actually really good or what's proven?
Well, there is a breakthrough nutritional line called Celtrian. So Celtrian is a range of supplements and nutritional beverages. It's actually the first brand to include all three cellular nutrients within one system. Okay, so it contains both the nicotinamide riboside, urolithin A, and the Glynac. There are actually three product lines that Celtrian offers, and that being Celtrian Cellular Energy, and that is that contains the nicotinamide riboside that I mentioned, the NR, that helps to boost NAD, boosting cellular energy production. And that comes in a drink mix form, so you can add the powder mix to really any cold beverage to take on a daily basis. There is also Celtrian Cellular Strength, and that contains the urolithin A that we spoke about, in addition to magnesium. And that also comes in a drink mix powder form as well as a capsule if you prefer to take it in a pill form. And then there is Celtrian Cellular Protect. So that includes the Glynac, in addition to other antioxidants such as vitamin C, E, selenium, zinc, all of that within the drink mix powder form as well as a capsule that you can take. So this is really a game changer, I think, in terms of nutrition, cellular health, in that we have another tool, that we can add to our toolkit to really impact the way that our cells function, the way that our body performs over time, and having, a strong impact on how we age.
Wow, sounds fascinating. So what kind of, how do people feel when they use this particular type of supplementation?
Well, of course, the experiences are going to vary, and it really depends on, what supplements that you're taking. But I would say for the Celtrian Cellular Energy, oftentimes people do feel a boost of energy, soon after taking the supplement. And it's not just, it's not a quick fix, because I think that oftentimes, most of us, I think at some point in life, and definitely as working adults, we feel tired, so we're looking for that quick fix, whether that be caffeine or soda or something that's going to give us a jolt. But that's not sustainable energy. When you're taking a cellular nutrient, this is something that's going to give you long-term benefit, right? So it's not a jolt that you're going to feel like, oh, I'm ready to go, and then you crash a few hours later, right? It is giving you sustainable energy so that your cells are functioning at an optimal level long-term. Of course, as long as you are consistent with the supplement, you will see these effects, but you should feel rather over time increased energy and stamina, and in terms of muscle strength. So if you're taking the Celtrian Strength, Here again, as I mentioned in the clinical trials, they did notice increased strength after taking the supplement over some time. Now, again, the timeline is going to vary from one individual to the next. The trial that was looked at in middle-aged adults, the supplementation was actually with the urolithin A was actually over 4 months. So it was several months that they were taking the supplement, and when the results were revealed or what have you. But it could be several weeks to several months that you started to notice change. But some of those things may be that there is a higher level baseline energy, and perhaps that you do feel stronger.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that when I was first brought this onto my screen was from the producer, and the producer says, well, why don't we take a look at this and, maybe take a look at how it affects, and maybe if you have experience, go ahead and share that on the air. So I thought that I would. And like you said, as I first used, I kind of mixed it up just in water. And I realized, because I'm somebody who's pretty active, especially in movement, is that, when people think of energy, they think of that jolt, like something like what you get from energy drinks, which, like you said, eventually you just crash. And then the other thing that's overlooked, too, is with that kind of energy, which I think kind of really hammers away at the adrenal area of the kidneys, which is where energy tends to come from, is that you also find yourself becoming really irritable. Okay?
Yeah.
So now that being said, so I started doing this, and here I'm active in the day, and I can feel this even sense of energy, like I wasn't wearing down or getting tired at certain times like I thought that I would. Another thing that I noticed, too, is if I would eat a snack or maybe some lunch or something, how you would tend to find those food crashes where you feel like taking a nap. And that also depends on what you decide to eat for lunch. A big sandwich, versus something else is good, because of the energy that the body needs to actually break that down. And then on top of that, what I also noticed, too, was irritability. All of a sudden, things just mentally weren't bothering me. People weren't bothering me anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest overlooked things that I hear. Well, I get this energy, but nobody ever talks about this clear mental capacity, like how you could be at the store standing in line and maybe the clerk's taking a little longer. You got that customer that's asking a long litany of annoying, stupid questions, and you're like, come on, can we move it along already? You're just kind of finding yourself standing there peacefully, like, when it gets done, it gets done. It just doesn't bother you. And to me, that seemed to be one of the great benefits, that I was like, this is all right. I kind of like, the fact that I don't get irritable, that I'm patient.
That is so cool.
And it really is, because the thing is, we've talked a lot about, things such as meditation, spiritual development, so forth and so on, and how when people have goals, how a lot of times the answers to achieving goals, whether it's that next step that you need to take, or, that certain message, we tend to not notice that they're right in front of us. And I think it's because our mental capacity just doesn't have that subtle, in-the-moment clarity that I felt that I was having as a result of using this. And this was after just the first day to 2 days. So I thought that would be an important thing to bring up, for you to be able to describe what's really going on there.
And so you were taking the Celtrian Cellular Energy? Is that what you were taking?
It was 3 different packages. It was Energy Power, I think it was, a Rebuild, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not right in front of me. But anyway, it was 3 at the same time, and just mixing it in just water. So.
Okay. Well, it makes a lot of sense. And, also, too, as I mentioned, with the Celtrian Cellular Energy, it contains the nicotinamide riboside, but also B vitamins and vitamin C. And so, what B vitamins and vitamin C do for us mentally is that they have impacts on neurotransmitter production. So they can have calming effects to the brain. So that may also be what you were feeling, in that, that serotonin maybe was hanging around a little bit longer, and, that was allowing you to be, more at ease during the course of your day, because you had those added vitamins to kind of, guide you through, through the course of your day. So, nutrition is so important. It impacts so many different, aspects of our health and our body. And it's just really great now that we have these cellular nutrients that are kind of like, Power Rangers, if you will, that we can add to
Right.
the regular vitamins that we've already probably been taking. We have this extra tool in our box now.
So I looked it up. It was protect, strength, and energy were the three that I was using all at once.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So let's talk
Yeah.
about what those are, because, a lot of people, I'd like to have more energy, and I'm thinking, well, that's great, but how do you describe that? And most people think of that jolt that you're talking about. It's sort of nervous energy that
Yeah.
if you're not out, like what caffeine can give you in the
Mhm.
morning.
Mhm.
And what I'd like to say to people is you don't notice, and I like to pay attention. I don't like to praise something unless I've tried it and I notice personally, well, what do I feel from this? And then try to relate
Mhm.
it into a way that people go, oh, I get it. And so the biggest one for me, which I really love, because I was always somebody who could be, not that I'm quick on the trigger, but I think we all get that irritable state. We're fatigued in the
Yeah.
day, a long
Oh,
day
for
at work,
sure.
whatever it is, or maybe your mind's thinking about something that irritated you,
Mhm.
who knows, a year ago, and somehow it comes back and you're emotionally attaching to that particular memory, and so therefore you're not in that moment. And so you take it out on whatever's going on there. But with this,
Mhm.
you feel sort of like this even, serene clarity, like what meditation actually brings you, a sense of calm in the moment. And for
Right.
something like that to do it, I became curious, well, what's in this stuff that's causing that? See, to me, that was really
Well,
big, because the energy is important, but if you don't have that mental capacity, what difference does it make? You're
right.
just an energetic a-hole. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, you make an excellent point, because you don't want that adrenal rush, and I think that's a lot of things. A lot of times, that's what those quick fix energy drinks give us. Whether it be the caffeine or the energy drinks with what is it? Basically caffeine and sugar.
Oh,
It's really
yeah.
just it's getting you pumped up, but it's basically triggering your sympathetic drive, right? Your fight or flight, to get up and go, and that's why you feel maybe palpitations or your heart racing. You don't really have that mental clarity, because that's not what is happening when you're in sympathetic drive. Sympathetic drive is really it is a response. It's a response for protection. You got to get up and go and get yourself out of danger, right? So your epinephrine levels go up, cortisol levels go up, and you're in fight or flight mode. You're trying to get out of danger, but we don't need to be in that state all day. And so oftentimes that's what those quick fix energy things will do for you, is it gets that adrenaline up. But with cellular nutrients, and as I mentioned with the other vitamins, so B vitamins, vitamin C, things of that nature, that's working on sustainable energy, so that at the cellular level, you are producing the energy that is needed to sustain you throughout the course of your day. And what we're finding as well, because it's funny that you mentioned that you felt more clear
Right.
throughout the course of the day. We're finding more things with more research in terms of what the responses are for those who supplement with these cellular nutrients. So actually, there was a small clinical trial that was conducted at Baylor College of Medicine that was published just earlier this year, that was looking at GlyNAC supplementation in older adults. And what they found is that there was improved cognition as well as muscle strength with GlyNAC. So we have known that GlyNAC has been helpful for boosting immune response, right, for cellular protection, as it boosts glutathione synthesis and things of that nature. But now this new study is showing that there are some other positive effects of this particular cellular nutrient. So, there could have been many things, Daniel, that was helping you get through
Right.
your day,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure it was a combination of all of the cellular nutrients in addition to the added vitamins that come with the Celtrian brand.
Because like we both agree, you're not really getting it in your food as much as you used to be able to decades and decades ago, because quite frankly, look, food is processed differently. I mean, we've covered this like
Mm-hmm.
crazy on the show over the years in ways that people go, where do you come up with this? Well, you just kind of open up a book. There's a place called a library. You've heard of these, right? But everybody kind of gets most of their information now on the fly on their cell phones, and there's a good reason for irritability right there, because what you basically are holding is heroin in your hand, only this time it's technology and electronics. But the fact is that, first of all, as you said, it's what also our habits are. If you're that person that's holding that phone all day long and you're engaged in only that, well, of course, you're going to be irritable, and this might help you feel a little more calm, but you're still engaging in all the practices that got you to where you are at in the first place. So that's certainly, we've talked a lot about that today here on the program. But when you decide to change those habits, you decide to go out for that 30-minute walk each day, maybe around your neighborhood, or as you say, being active at the most active parts of your day rather than sitting and, being a couch potato. Being active, I mean, how many people don't feel good after movement? I mean, I always feel good when you might get out and work in the yard. You dread it before you do it, but once you're in it, you're like, there's that feeling of satisfaction, like I've just accomplished something. Now imagine being in that good mental state and maybe some of those ideas about, geez, there's this goal I would like to have, and then something comes to you, and now there you go. I mean, so you really got a nice little partner here coming along, really helping you take care of business.
For sure. Yeah, movement is a natural antidepressant.
Right, I agree.
And there's studies to show that as well. Those endorphins that get pumped out, that's, the happy chemicals and the neurotransmitters that are produced when we just simply move. It is undeniable.
Well, we weren't given legs just to simply sit.
Exactly. We're dynamic beings, which means that we're made to move. You just can't get around it. That's just how we have been created. And so you can't deny that. And again, as I mentioned, movement just has to be a lifestyle. You have to look at it as, look, this is a part of my day, every day. Not just trying to get to the gym or trying to get to the class or looking for some cool piece of equipment, to engage you for maybe a couple of weeks. But, just figuring out what can I do in the course of my day every day to get me moving. And I promise you will feel so much better when it's just really part of your lifestyle.
Absolutely agreed. Now, for people who are approaching in or even beyond midlife, have you found this particular supplement to be able to not only help reverse but actually increase positive cell production? I guess that's the best way I know how to put that.
So, yes, essentially that's what's been found in the clinical trials is that with consistent supplementation, there definitely has been improvement of cellular function over time, and it's sustainable. And in addition, when the supplementation stops, then the reversal goes pretty much back to baseline. That's actually one of the things that they noted in the study at Baylor College of Medicine. I believe it was 24 weeks that the participants took the supplement, and there was sustainable change over time at all of the endpoints because they looked at multiple things. They looked at glutathione synthesis, they looked at cognition, they looked at strength, and as well as many other endpoints. But the effects in terms of improvement were sustainable over that course of time, and for some improved, to what we would see at a younger stage in life. But when the supplement was stopped, so after 12 weeks of cessation, they went back to baseline. So yes, these cellular changes can occur and can be sustainable with consistent use, but then they can also revert back to baseline if the supplementation is discontinued.
And sometimes that might create the argument, well, gee whiz. Well, think about everything else. Well, if you're doing this one thing and you're feeling the positive change and then you stop doing it, well, of course it's going to go back to the way things are. And that's with all things, I would think.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so, I think that was, something that one would anticipate happening. But, yeah, so consistency is key across the board. So whether you're talking about nutrition, movement, but also, for proper cellular health, being consistent with the supplementation.
So Celtrian seems to be a really nice cellular nutritional supplement, that you can actually implement to your daily routine. How can people find out more about where this is, more information if they want to study more about that before they engage in it? Where do people go?
So sure, you can go to Celtrian.com. For more information and to look at all of the products that are available and to learn more about age-associated cellular decline. If you're on social, you can go to their Instagram page at Celtrian. And in terms of purchasing the products, I believe both Celtrian.com and on the Instagram page, you have access to the products, as well as on Amazon and Walmart.com.
Well, very good. Well, Dr. Noelle Reed, thank you so much for being here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. Well, I think that it's just a fact that we're living longer, and I think that should, give us some level of optimism. We are living longer these days. It's just a fact, and in fact, the fastest growing segment of the global population are those 80 years and beyond. But I think it's important to know that it's not just about adding life to your years, or years to your life rather, but life to your years, and we have the power to do so. And it's as simple as, staying with those foundational things, and that being nutrition, regular, consistent movement, human engagement, and now we have cellular nutrients, to add to our toolbox to perhaps have impact on our health and longevity.
And as the saying goes, so within, so without. Thank you so much for being on the program today. It's been wonderful to get all this fabulous information about cellular nutrition, growth, all of it. Wow, amazing stuff.
Sure.
Thank you again
for having me.
You bet. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletters to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, wherever you are is where you should be. Have a great day.